Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep today into the core mechanics of human motivation and focus, really getting into that rare psychological state, the one that's so absorbing that, anxiety and mental drift just seem to vanish.
Right, that's the concept of the optimal experience, isn't it? What researchers often call flow.
Exactly, flow. And it feels like it could be a really powerful antidote to, well, mental stagnation, boredom, maybe even anxiety in some cases.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to try and understand the precise recipe, if you will, for achieving this peak state. We're pulling together sources from classical psychoanalysis, think Freud, Pavlov, and kind of merging them with modern motivational science.
All to figure out the conditions necessary for you to find that deep, satisfying engagement we're talking about.
Yeah, we want to know how focus and purposeful activity combine to produce what some might call the peak human experience.
And, okay, we have to start with this absolute psychological paradox. It's one that completely flips the script on how I think many of us view our daily lives.
You mean the whole work versus leisure thing?
Yeah. In Western society, it feels like we're culturally conditioned almost to believe that work is just this painful necessity, right? An imposition. And that true happiness, that only resides in like unstructured leisure time, weekends, holidays.
But when researchers actually dig into this, using tools like the experience sampling method or ESM,
Remind us how that works again.
well, it basically involves prompting people multiple times a day, maybe through a pager back in the day or smartphone app now, to just report what they're doing, how they're feeling, what skills they're using, right in the moment.
Okay.
And the data. It tells a completely different story. It reveals this striking paradox. People actually report feeling significantly more happy, strong, creative, and satisfied when they're engaged in challenging activities, especially those activities they themselves define as work.
More happy at work. That sounds counterintuitive to a lot of people, I bet.
It really does. So why does the 9 to 5 or, whatever your structured challenge might be, often win out psychologically over the weekend or pure free time?
What's the mechanism there?
It really boils down to the active nature of the experience. Work environments or any sufficiently complex activity, really, they tend to demand two key things. There's a challenge involved, and you have to use your skills to meet it.
Right, you're being pushed a bit.
Exactly. You're constantly required to meet some kind of rising challenge. You often get feedback, even if it's just seeing the results of your actions, and you have to adjust what you're doing. This active engagement creates those prime conditions for flow. It's that sweet spot where the difficulty of the task kind of perfectly matches your current ability level.
So you're stretched, but not completely overwhelmed, and you're certainly not bored.
Precisely. But then there's the flip side, the corollary finding from these studies, and it's deeply unsettling.
Which is?
In their free time, when people are finally free from the constraints of work, supposedly living the good life, they often report feeling more sad, weak, dull, and dissatisfied.
Oh.
Because often their skills are just lying dormant. They're underutilized. And this results in a kind of mental entropy or drift. Things just feel flat.
Drift. That feels like the right word. That sort of aimless, slightly anxious feeling you can get when you have nothing specific to focus on.
That's exactly it. When we pursue purely passive leisure activities, and the ESM studies often highlight things like watching television for hours on end, we're choosing something that demands almost nothing from us,
No challenge, no skill use.
and therefore no real engagement feedback loop. Your mind is essentially starved of constructive input, and it starts to experience either anxiety or boredom, sometimes both.
It's almost as if we confuse the absence of external constraints like a boss or deadlines with the actual presence of happiness.
That's a great way to put it. We tend to disregard the actual quality of our immediate moment-to-moment experience because we're so maybe deeply programmed by these cultural stereotypes that just insist work is bad, leisure is good, full stop.
Work is an automatic imposition, something to be escaped at all costs.
Exactly. And this leads to this really common behavior pattern, doesn't it? Where we push through our work days, maybe grumbling, viewing them merely as the necessary cost to get to the weekend,
Yeah, just gotta get through the week.
only to arrive at that much-anticipated leisure time and feel, well, kind of empty. Because we haven't actually prepared ourselves for constructive, challenging engagement within that free time. We haven't lined up activities that can induce flow.
It's like we expect happiness to just happen automatically once the demands stop.
Right. And if you look at the trajectory of anyone who's achieved deep commitment in a field or extraordinary creativity, think artists, scientists, athletes, that journey almost always starts from finding profound sheer enjoyment in the activity itself.
Not just dreaming about the end result or the external reward.
Precisely. It's the pleasure of using and developing your skills that drives the commitment forward. Those moments of deep engagement, of flow, are what hook you initially and lead to that full commitment.
That makes perfect sense. The process itself becomes the reward. And that sets the stage beautifully for understanding what actually fuels sustained engagement, doesn't it? Because if we want to stop chasing potentially empty leisure and start living more often in that state of flow, we need like a modern, updated operating system for motivation.
Yeah, something beyond the old carrot and stick model.
Exactly. Which brings us to these three core drivers of meaningful engagement, moving far beyond just simple rewards and punishments.
Okay, so modern motivational science, particularly self-determination theory, which has just mountains of research behind it, identifies three essential innate psychological needs. And when these needs are satisfied, they lead to intrinsic motivation, doing things for their own sake, and optimal human functioning, better performance, better well-being, the whole package.
All right, let's break them down. What's the first one?
The first, and you could argue maybe the most crucial, is autonomy. This is just that fundamental, basic human desire to direct our own lives. We have this inherent yearning to feel like we're the authors of our own experience. Not just pawns following someone else's script or orders.
Having a sense of control, of choice.
Exactly. And this is why some really forward-thinking companies have found ways to actually institutionalize autonomy, to build it into the structure of work.
Like the famous example, I think it was 3M with their 15% time.
That's the classic one. They allowed their technical staff to spend, about 15% of their work time on projects entirely of their own choosing, completely independent of their main assignments.
And that wasn't seen as slacking off, was it?
Not at all. It was recognized as psychologically essential fuel. And that autonomous self-direction led directly to huge breakthroughs, like Post-it notes, which famously emerged from one scientist just pursuing his own curiosity during that 15% time.
Wow. So it proves that when motivation shifts from just external compliance, doing what you're told, to genuine internal self-direction, the results, the creativity, the engagement can just skyrocket.
Absolutely. So autonomy is number one. The second core element is mastery.
Mastery. That urge to get better at stuff.
Precisely. It's the urge to get better and better at something that genuinely matters to us. And this connects right back to our first point about that work paradox. Remember how people felt more satisfied at work? A big part of that is the satisfaction we derive purely from utilizing and stretching our skills, learning, improving, overcoming challenges.
The pursuit of mastery is fascinating because it's inherently endless, right? It's asymptotic, as they say. You can always get better. You can approach perfect mastery, but you can never actually fully arrive.
That's a key point. If you could ever fully master something to the point where there was zero challenge left, the feeling of flow would actually disappear.
Yeah.
You just slip back into boredom.
So the challenge must keep rising, or at least be perceived as rising, relative to your skill level.
Correct. And the third essential element, which provides the larger context, the why behind it all, is purpose.
Purpose, the big one.
It's that profound yearning we seem to have to do what we do in service of something larger than ourselves, to contribute to something meaningful beyond just our own benefit.
So when autonomy, mastery, and purpose are all aligned, when you feel you have choice, you're getting better at something important, and it connects to a bigger picture.
Then the external rewards, like salary or status, they often become secondary. Motivation becomes self-sustaining, intrinsic, and incredibly powerful. That's the sweet spot for deep, lasting engagement.
Okay, that framework, autonomy, mastery, purpose, feels really solid. But when we're seeking this deep engagement, you mentioned there's a critical trap we need to avoid, something about a goals-first mentality.
Yes, exactly. This is a really common pitfall. The goals-first mentality is where you continually delay happiness or satisfaction, treating the entire process leading up to the goal as just a necessary chore, something to be endured.
Like, I'll be happy when I finish this project, or when I get that promotion, or when I lose the weight.
Right. And psychologically, that's a fundamentally unhealthy contract you're making with yourself. If you only allow yourself satisfaction once you reach a very specific, often narrow goal,
You set yourself up for disappointment.
you set up an almost adversarial either-or conflict with reality. It creates this unnecessary psychological box.
Hmm.
Either you achieve the specific goal, and okay, you're deemed successful for a moment. Or you fall short, maybe even slightly, and you feel like a disappointment.
And that mindset restricts satisfaction to just that one narrow outcome, right? Even though so much fulfillment often comes from the learning, the struggle, the growth experience during the pursuit itself.
Exactly. This is where we really see the beauty of an intrinsic motivation framework, driven by autonomy, mastery, and purpose. The process is the reward. The daily engagement, the learning, the small steps of mastery, that's where the sustained satisfaction lies, not just at some distant finish line.
That makes sense. You get to enjoy the journey, not just pin all your hopes on the destination.
And, this idea of finding profound, satisfying engagements through internally focused mental work, through mastering skills, it's actually deeply rooted in classical psychology, too. It's not just a modern idea. We can connect this AMP framework, autonomy, mastery, purpose, right back to Freud's concept of sublimation.
Ah, sublimation. That's a term people hear a lot, but maybe don't fully grasp. It often gets reduced to just a catch-all for, like, displacing energy, right?
Yeah.
But in the context of peak experience, of flow, what does it genuinely mean?
Well, Freud talked about displacing the aims of our basic drives, particularly the libido, the life energy, away from their original, maybe more primitive targets, and channeling them into socially acceptable and productive avenues. Think things like scientific research, artistic creation, intellectual pursuits.
Okay.
And when we achieve this displacement effectively through sublimation, Freud argued that we can significantly heighten the pleasure derived specifically from that mental and intellectual work.
So the intense focus a physicist puts into solving a really complex equation, or the sort of all-consuming effort an artist puts into a sculpture, that satisfaction isn't just a distraction from other urges.
No. According to Freud, it's a powerful redirection of fundamental psychic energy, and the satisfaction derived has a special quality, as he put it.
Special quality. How so?
Freud suggested that these feelings, the joy of discovery or creation, seem finer and higher, fundamentally different in quality from the satisfaction of achieving basic biological needs like hunger or thirst.
Okay, finer and higher.
And crucially, he believed this kind of satisfaction derived from sublimated mental work is relatively protected from the chaos and disappointments of the external world. He famously said that once this kind of satisfaction is achieved, fate can then do little to harm us.
Wow, that sounds like an internal fortress, a source of contentment that's less vulnerable to external circumstances.
Pretty much. It sounds like the ideal path to sustained, resilient happiness, doesn't it? Finding deep joy in work that fate can't easily touch.
It really does.
Yeah.
But this is where I always find a sticking point with Freud's take on this. He noted a massive limitation with this technique, didn't he?
He did. It's a significant caveat.
He observed that this intense, high-level sublimation, this path to the finer and higher joys, is accessible really only to the few. Why? Because it presupposes special aptitudes and gifts that he believed just aren't common enough to be universally effective.
Yes.
That sounds, well, frankly, fundamentally elitist and pretty restrictive. Like, only geniuses can access this deep form of satisfaction.
It does sound that way, and that's a crucial historical limitation we absolutely have to wrestle with, especially looking back from our modern context. Freud was largely operating under the assumption of fixed traits, right? That abilities, these special aptitudes, were mostly innate, handed out at birth.
So if the joy of mastery, the joy of sublimation, requires these special gifts you're either born with or not, then most people are basically locked out of this highest form of psychological satisfaction.
According to that view, yes. But what if we reject that premise? What if we reject the idea of fixed ability?
Okay.
What if instead we shift our internal orientation? What if we come to believe that we can actually develop those special aptitudes through effort and dedication?
Ah, now we're moving into the territory of the growth mindset.
Exactly. The growth mindset, researched so extensively by Carol Dweck, is simply the fundamental belief that people can develop their abilities through dedication, good strategies, and hard work. Brains and talent are just the starting point.
And this mindset fundamentally reframes how we see effort, right?
Completely. In a fixed mindset, needing to exert effort is seen as a sign of innate deficiency. Like, if I had to try hard, I must not be smart enough. Effort feels like a negative.
But in a growth mindset.
Effort is viewed as a positive, constructive force. It's the necessary path to mastery. It's how you get smarter, how you build skills.
And this shift in belief is absolutely vital for sustaining the kind of long-term, challenging work that's required for true engagement, for flow.
Absolutely. If you believe your abilities are fixed, any serious challenge feels like a threat to your self-worth. It risks exposing your supposed limitations, so the tendency is towards avoidance behavior. Stick to what you know you're good at.
But if you adopt the growth mindset,
Then a challenge isn't a threat, it's just data. It's an opportunity to apply constructive effort, learn something new, and deepen the process of mastery.
We see this play out in leadership too, don't we?
Definitely. Managers who operate with a growth mindset are far more committed to employee development. They see potential everywhere because they recognize that raw talent is only the starting point. They value the process, the resilience, the learning, the effort. That's what truly counts in the long run.
So the growth mindset essentially democratizes the very aptitudes that Freud thought were so exclusive. It suggests that maybe the capacity for deep sublimated joy isn't just for the lucky few.
It opens that door much wider, yes.
Yeah.
It suggests the potential is there if we cultivate the right belief system about our own capabilities.
That's a really powerful connection. Okay, so we've established the internal drivers: autonomy, mastery, purpose, and the crucial belief system that underpins effort, the growth mindset. But building a deep, satisfying life, getting into flow consistently, isn't just about finding the right motivations. It's also about having the mental tools, the mechanisms to maintain stability and attention when things get tough or when internal contradictions arise.
Right, because life throws curveballs, focus waivers.
Exactly. So that brings us to our third section, where we dive into the actual cognitive and even physiological mechanisms that help us regulate focus and control our inner state.
Okay. And a good place to start here is looking at how we manage internal inconsistency, which can be a major disruptor of focus and flow. We're talking about cognitive dissonance.
Ah, yes, Leon Festinger's classic theory, the psychological engine of self-justification.
It's a great description. The core premise is incredibly powerful and simple. The human drive for consistency is almost non-negotiable. We need our beliefs and actions to line up.
We hate feeling like hypocrites, basically.
Yes, pretty much. When there's an inconsistency maybe between two beliefs we hold, or more commonly, between a belief and an action we've taken, we experience this uncomfortable psychological tension. That's dissonance.
And we're powerfully motivated to get rid of that discomfort.
Hugely motivated. Think about a simple, everyday example. Let's say you consider yourself a smart shopper, very rational. You spend a lot of money on a complex piece of equipment, maybe a new camera.
Okay.
Then, after buying it, you discover it has a significant flaw, or maybe you read a review panning it. Now you have dissonance. Your belief, I am smart and made a good purchase, clashes with the reality, this expensive purchase might be flawed.
Right. That feels uncomfortable. So what happens next? What's the typical path to reducing that dissonance?
Well, interestingly, we often don't just admit we made a mistake and return the item. Instead, we start adjusting our beliefs to fit the action we already took. We engage in various dissonance reduction strategies. We might start emphasizing all the positives of the camera we bought. It's so rugged it'll last forever, while simultaneously downplaying the positives of the cameras we didn't choose. The competitor was too complicated anyway. We're essentially justifying our decision after the fact.
Making ourselves feel better about the choice we made.
Exactly. Another key strategy is seeking social support. We talk to friends who also bought the same camera, or we selectively read positive reviews online, anything that confirms our choice was good, and we actively avoid people or information that would increase the dissonance, that would tell us we messed up.
It's amazing how much mental energy we dedicate to reducing this dissonance, isn't it? We see it play out in really extreme ways sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Think about historical examples like studies of cults or movements whose prophecies failed. Festinger himself studied a group, the Millerites, who predicted the end of the world on a specific date.
And the world didn't end.
Right, that's the ultimate disconfirming evidence. You'd expect them to just abandon the belief system. But what happened? Many of the most committed members didn't. Instead, they actually intensified their efforts to recruit new members. They reinterpreted the prophecy, saying their faith had saved the world, for example.
They doubled down.
They doubled down. They sought social support within the group and worked harder to rationalize their beliefs to reduce that massive dissonance. It shows that the energy we dedicate to reducing dissonance can sometimes be stronger than objective evidence.
So managing dissonance is crucial for maintaining a sense of internal consistency, which prevents us from constantly second-guessing our actions and allows us to move forward.
Yes, it provides stability. But maintaining deep engagement also requires us to actively manage our path forward, not just justify the past. And this is where implementation intentions become incredibly useful.
Okay, implementation intentions. This sounds more proactive.
It is. This concept helps us move goals out of the realm of just vague aspirations like, oh, I really should exercise more, or I want to write that book someday, and into the concrete world of planned action.
How does it work?
It uses a simple but powerful if-then format. You get really specific about what you want to achieve, when and where you will do it, and crucially, how you will handle potential obstacles.
So instead of "I'll be healthier," it's more like,
It's more like,
"Huh,
if it is Tuesday morning after breakfast, then I will go for a 30-minute run around the park. Or if I feel tired and don't want to run, then I will put on my running shoes and walk for 15 minutes instead.
so you pre-decide the action linked to a specific cue or situation.
Exactly. And why is this so effective? Because if your goals remain too abstract, your conscious mind has to make a fresh decision every single time the opportunity arises.
Yeah.
Should I exercise now? Maybe later. Where should I go? How long?
That constant decision-making is mentally taxing, right? It drains willpower.
It absolutely does. It wears you down. But if you establish that specific if-then rule, the context itself, the if part, like the specific time and location, acts as an almost automatic cue.
The decision is already made.
Right.
Sure.
Your brain doesn't have to deliberate. This specificity helps you automatically refuse distractions and generates a genuine, almost unconscious urge to do the right thing at the right time, as researchers put it. It helps make goal pursuit feel more automatic and less effortful.
That clarity seems vital for stabilizing behavior and staying on track towards those mastery goals we talked about. Okay, so we have cognitive dissonance management for consistency, implementation intentions for proactive planning. Now let's get even more fundamental. Let's move down to the physiological reality of sustained focus. According to the groundbreaking research of Ivan Pavlov, yes, the dog guy's sustained mental engagement is definitely not automatic. It's an active process.
That's right. Sustained, deep focus, the kind you need for flow, isn't just a matter of trying harder or sheer willpower. Pavlov's work suggests it's a careful dynamic balancing act within the brain. He called it maintaining a functional mosaic of cortical activity.
A functional mosaic.
Yeah.
Okay, help us picture that. What does that mean in practical terms?
Imagine your brain's cortex, the outer layer, like a complex switchboard or maybe a map with areas lighting up. When you're focused on a task, certain areas related to that task show high levels of neural activity that's excitation. They're brightly lit.
Okay.
But crucially, for that focus to be sharp and effective, the surrounding areas of the cortex need to be dampened down, quieted. That's inhibition. Deep focus means keeping the excitation localized to the relevant areas while actively inhibiting irrelevant activity or distractions. The mosaic is this pattern of specific excitation surrounded by active inhibition.
So it's not just about turning on the right parts, but also actively turning off the wrong parts.
Exactly. It's a constant management of both excitation and inhibition. And what happens if you fail to manage this balance effectively?
What did Pavlov find?
He found that if inhibitory stimuli, think things like prolonged, monotonous activity, sensory deprivation, or just sheer exhaustion, are applied repeatedly without any counterbalancing excitation, that inhibition starts to spread. It doesn't stay localized.
It irradiates, was his term.
Yes, it irradiates across wider and wider areas of the cortex. And when that inhibition spreads too broadly, the result is profound protective inhibition. The animal, or the human, essentially falls asleep.
So drowsiness, that feeling of your brain shutting down when you're bored or exhausted, is literally the spread of inhibition across the cortex.
That's the idea. It demonstrates that mental energy and focus aren't passive states. They have to be actively managed to prevent this wide irradiation of inhibition. You need to maintain that sharp, functional mosaic.
Which emphasizes, again, that deep focus, getting into flow, isn't a luxury state you just fell into. It's an active control process. You might need to consciously introduce new stimuli, change tasks slightly, or manage your energy levels to keep that inhibition in check and the focus sharp.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing balancing act. And connecting this active physiological management back to our subjective moment-to-moment experience of being focused or unfocused, we really should discuss the concept of the felt sense.
The felt sense, okay, this sounds a bit more subtle. Is it just another term for like a gut feeling?
It's related,
Yeah.
but it's much more complex and nuanced than just a simple gut feeling. The felt sense, a concept really central to the work of thinkers like Eugene Gattelin and also Peter Levine in trauma work, describes this complex, ever-shifting inner awareness we have.
Inner awareness of what?
It's an intricate mixture of internal body data, things like posture, muscle tension or relaxation, subtle physiological shifts like heart rate or breathing changes, temperature sensations intertwined with the influence of our thoughts and the immediate environment. But it's often not fully formed into easily labeled emotions like anger or joy or sadness.
Sounds pre-verbal. Or preconceptual.
Often, yes. It's more like a holistic, subtle, body-based resonance or feeling tone that helps us interpret and react to situations, often before we can consciously articulate why. It's the way we process complex, fuzzy, unformulated information.
Okay, I think I get it. Like when you walk into a room and just get a vibe, but you can't immediately say why, or when you're wrestling with a difficult decision and logic isn't helping, but you have this underlying bodily sense of which way feels right or wrong.
Precisely. That's tapping into the felt sense. Genlin argued it's integral to the experience of being alive. It's constantly shifting, shaping itself to fit our surroundings, helping us acquire new information, understand nuance, and interrelate with others authentically.
And paying attention to it is important.
Critically important. When you face a complex situation where pure logic falls short, consciously paying attention to that subtle whole-body shift, the third sense is often how we intuitively integrate all the disparate data points and find the right path forward. Recognizing and learning to access this sense is considered a crucial step in processing difficult experiences, like trauma, or in making authentic life choices that align with our deeper selves.
That makes sense. Recognizing our full internal landscape, cognitive, emotional, and this subtle physiological reality via the felt sense seems essential for sustaining commitment and navigating life effectively. Okay, so we've covered the mechanics of motivation and focus. Now let's turn to perhaps the deepest drivers of long-term commitment, the role of meaning and critically self-acceptance. This brings us to our final section on, let's call them the existential pillars of enduring purpose.
Indeed. And we're better to start than with the existential view of meaning, powerfully exemplified by Viktor Frankl. His insights were forged, quite literally, in the crucible of Nazi concentration camps.
Incredible experiences informing his work.
Absolutely. Frankl emphasized that actively encouraging individuals to review and find meaning in their lives creates a necessary and, importantly, a healthy kind of logical tension within them.
Logical tension. I like that he focused on tension, not just relaxation or ease as the goal. That suggests growth comes from acknowledging and working with the gap between where you are and where you feel you ought to be, or what your life could mean.
Exactly. He believed this tension strengthens mental health. Frankl argued that humans are inherently meaning-seeking creatures, and that one of the most powerful human capacities is the ability to transform unavoidable suffering into some form of meaningful sacrifice or achievement.
Can you give an example of what he meant?
He recounted a profound interaction in the camp with a fellow prisoner, a man deeply despondent. Frankl helped him realize that his continued suffering, his choice to endure, could be seen as a sacrifice that would spare his beloved wife who had died earlier the pain of seeing him perish. For that man, his struggle was instantly transformed. It went from being pointless, brutal torture to being a profoundly meaningful sacrifice made out of love. That commitment to a purpose larger than his own immediate survival, that tension between his suffering and its meaning, became his driving force, giving him a reason to endure.
That's incredibly powerful, and it stands in such stark contrast to the modern tendency sometimes to try and avoid all discomfort at all costs. Frankl's work suggests that suffering, when imbued with purpose, can actually become a source of strength.
It can. And this idea of a powerful internal drive toward a goal, whether it's a consciously chosen meaning like Frankl described or even an unconscious one, is also central to the work of Alfred Adler. He termed this finalism.
Finalism. What did Adler mean by that?
Adler, who was an early colleague of Freud's before breaking away, posited that all human behavior, even neurotic behavior, is profoundly purposive. It's striving, consciously or unconsciously, toward some kind of end goal. Often he suggested this is an idealized, fictional final goal of achieving superiority, security, or even a kind of godliness.
So even patterns that look self-destructive from the outside, like neurosis, are actually, in Adler's view, intentional efforts aimed at achieving some internal, albeit perhaps misguided, goal.
That's the core idea. The life plan, the personality ideal, the fictional final goal, it's ultimately self-determined by the individual early in life, based on their experiences and interpretations. The critical element here, for our discussion, is that this powerful internal purpose, this final goal, tends to actively distort the person's perception of objective reality in order to maintain its own integrity.
That's so.
Well, if your unconscious fictional final goal is, say, to always be superior to others, your mind will tend to dismiss, ignore, or radically reinterpret any evidence that suggests you are merely average or made a mistake. You'll selectively focus on data that confirms you're striving towards that goal of superiority. It highlights the immense, almost reality-bending power of having an internal purpose, even when that purpose might be flawed or based on a fiction.
Okay, so the challenge isn't just finding a purpose, as Frankel emphasized, but also ensuring that the purpose we adopt is grounded, adaptive, and contributes to something valuable, rather than just serving an isolated, perhaps neurotic, idealized self-image, as Adler warned.
Exactly. It's about aligning that powerful internal drive with reality and with pro-social values.
Mhm.
And doing that, sustaining that healthy alignment, requires immense internal resilience, which brings us squarely to the importance of self-acceptance and self-compassion.
Right, because striving for meaning and mastery can be exhausting if you're constantly beating yourself up.
Precisely. And here, the work of Dr. Kristen Neff is really illuminating. She introduced the crucial idea that healthy self-compassion actually involves balancing two necessary forms, two wings, if you like.
Okay, let's break down the difference. What are the two forms she describes?
She distinguishes between tender self-compassion and fierce self-compassion. Tender self-compassion is perhaps what most people think of first. It involves holding our own pain, failures, and imperfections with warmth, kindness, and a sense of common humanity.
Recognizing that suffering and imperfection are part of being human, not signs of personal defect.
Exactly. It's about comforting ourselves, validating our feelings, and realizing we are fundamentally worthy of love and dignity, regardless of our performance or achievements. It stops that destructive internal cycle of harsh self-criticism.
Okay, that's the tender side. What about fierce self-compassion? That sounds different, more active.
It is the more action-oriented element, yes. Fierce self-compassion involves bringing brave clarity to situations. It's about protecting ourselves. This means setting firm boundaries against harmful situations or relationships, speaking up for our needs, motivating ourselves to make necessary changes, and sometimes saying no forcefully. It's about claiming our power to protect ourselves from harm or exploitation, fueled by care for ourselves.
So we need both, the ability to soothe ourselves and the ability to stand up for ourselves.
Absolutely. Both are required for resilient, deep commitment over the long haul. You need the tenderness to handle setbacks without collapsing into self-blame, and the fierceness to navigate challenges and protect your energy and well-being.
And the key to knowing when to apply which kind and to ensure our actions are truly aligned with our values comes back to mindfulness, doesn't it? That ability to clearly see our inner beliefs and values.
Yes, without that clarity, without cultivating both tender and fierce self-compassion, we risk leading that unexamined life Socrates warned about. The frustration builds quietly over years.
Until maybe you hit that classic midlife crisis, that profound psychological shock where you suddenly realize you're in the wrong job, the wrong relationship, pursuing the wrong goals, simply because you were following a script, maybe society's script or your family script that wasn't authentically yours.
Exactly. You lack the self-awareness or the fierce compassion to change course earlier. And this internal struggle, this tension between striving for goals and meaning and the absolute necessity of self-acceptance is perfectly captured by a core insight from Carl Rogers, one of the giants of humanistic psychology.
Rogers.
What was his key insight here?
It's what he called the curious paradox.
Okay.
He said, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change.
Wait, that really is counterintuitive. We're so often told culturally that we have to motivate ourselves through harsh self-criticism, that we need to highlight our flaws and dissatisfaction to drive change.
Right. We think we need to reject parts of ourselves to change them. But Rogers suggests the exact opposite. He argued that genuine lasting change only becomes possible after we achieve unconditional self-acceptance.
Why? How does accepting yourself as you are lead to change? Because Rogers believed that acceptance provides the necessary psychological safety and emotional resources to change. When you stop fighting against the reality of who you are right now, your flaws, your struggles, your imperfections, you stop exhausting yourself in this endless internal battle for perfection.
You free up energy.
Precisely. That acceptance frees up the energy that was going into self-criticism and denial. Now you can use that energy to work hard, to face challenges constructively, to pursue mastery, but without the crippling anxiety that comes from needing to perform flawlessly just to prove your fundamental self-worth.
So it shifts us from that exhausting, self-antagonistic stance of me against my flaws towards a more holistic, integrated engagement of me, fully accepted, working towards my chosen purpose.
Beautifully put. That holistic approach accepting our inherent imperfection while simultaneously actively striving for meaning, Mastery and purpose is exactly what allows for sustained, deep engagement without leading to burnout or disillusionment.
It feels like we come full circle then.
I think so. This deep dive has really shown us, hasn't it, that the optimal experience, that state of flow, is often found not in passive leisure, but in challenging activities, frequently what we label work, precisely because they force us to actively engage and utilize our skills.
Right. And this deep engagement isn't accidental. It's fundamentally driven by satisfying those core psychological needs: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. This modern framework aligns surprisingly well with classical ideas, too, like Freud's concept of sublimation, channeling our basic energies towards higher intellectual or creative satisfaction.
And we saw that sustaining the state of flow, keeping that engagement alive, requires active management, both cognitively and physiologically. We need strategies to manage internal inconsistencies, like reducing cognitive dissonance. We need tools to regulate our path forward proactively, like specific implementation intentions.
And physiologically, we learn that maintaining focus is an active balancing act, managing that functional mosaic of cortical excitation and inhibition, as Pavlov showed. Plus, we need to tune into that subtle, crucial inner awareness, the felt sense, to navigate complexity.
Ultimately, securing long-term, resilient commitment seems to hinge on embracing that existential meaning. Frankl talked about finding purpose that creates that healthy, logical tension and can even transform suffering. And balancing that striving with the profound power of self-acceptance that paradox Rogers highlighted, which is what truly unlocks our potential for authentic change and deep, fulfilling engagement.
It all ties together beautifully. But let's circle back just one last time to that original historical roadblock we encountered with Freud.
The special aptitudes problem.
Yeah. He noted that finding that really finer and higher satisfaction, the deep joy derived from sublimated mental work, seemed accessible only to the few because, in his view, it required these innate special aptitudes and gifts.
Right, which creates a kind of fixed ceiling on human potential, suggesting that the most fulfilling psychological states might just be an accident of birth for a lucky elite.
But if, as we've explored throughout this deep dive today, deep engagement and flow are fundamentally a result of actively managing our cognitive and physiological states.
If it's the result of skillfully deploying things like implementation intentions, or actively balancing cortical excitation and inhibition, or intentionally cultivating and listening to our felt sense.
Does this mean that maybe the special aptitudes required for peak satisfaction, for consistent flow, are not actually innate, fixed gifts at all?
Could they instead be entirely trainable skills? Skills of attention regulation, emotional management, meaning-making, self-awareness.
And if they are trainable skills, then the final thought for you, the listener, has to be, what is the single specific cognitive or physiological training you could begin experimenting with, maybe even today?
Perhaps it's practicing just one microdose of an implementation intention for a small goal. Or maybe it's setting aside just 60 seconds, right now, to quietly check in and try to access your felt sense about something. What small step could you take to begin actively raising your own capacity for deep, fulfilling engagement and start unlocking your own optimal experience?